Welcome to our discussion on principles of economics, and we were discussing about money growth and inflation, right? This is in the context of one of the 10 principles that we learned earlier, that prices rise, that means general price level of the economy rise when government prints too much of money, which causes actually inflation. So before we discuss about today's uh, material, let me just quickly recap what we have discussed earlier. So, too much of money, that means when the central bank of an economy has the authority to money supply. In the context of India, it is the RBI. So, when RBI supplies additional money, that money will come to either you or me or several other individuals, and then individuals will get rid of that extra money by demanding goods and services. Thereby they will spend the money, they will spend themselves, or they will give it for loan purposes to someone else, and that person will demand money. And then what happens is, when the individuals demand more goods and services, the supply of goods and services cannot adjust instantaneously. That basically leads to inflation. And we were also relating to this supply of additional money and then inflation with the help of and one of the most important theory in macroeconomics called quantity theory of money. So quantity theory of money basically says these are the things that uh, as inflation, why we are discussing and relating to inflation and money supply, because as inflation happens, inflation causes price to decline, price to go up, and thereby value of money to decline. Okay, so if you were able to buy a particular good with $1 earlier, with the help of $1, that commodity or service may not be available right now when you have inflation. So inflation basically drives the prices up and reduces the value of money down. That is what we have discussed. Then we discussed about quantity theory of money using a simple demand and supply diagram and using an equation. In the demand and supply diagram, what we see that this is basically the quantity of money demand is actually negatively related to the value of money. Less is the value, more would be the quantity demand of money, and then positively related with the price level when other things are equal. So in this diagram, we have value of money in the left axis, left hand y axis, and the right hand side we measure price level. And let us assume that RBI gives a fixed amount of money supply, which is given by $1,000, and then if you introduce the quantity demand for money, this is money supply. So demand for money is again a downward sloping, because as I said, in the x axis we are measuring quantity of money, and in the y axis we are measuring value of money. So as value of money increases, quantity demand for money will come down, and as value of money goes down, then you need more money, quantity demand for money will increase. So therefore there is an inverse relationship between value of money and quantity of money you need. And this particular money supply, if you introduce here, the intersection between money supply and quantity demand will give you this. So equilibrium price level and equilibrium value of money. And then if you shift this MS curve to the right hand side, let's say this is MS2. So that means suppose RBI is supplying more money, and then what is happening? Price level is actually going up. Okay, more supply means more demand for goods and services, but supply of goods and services cannot adjust instantaneously, and as a result of which we will see inflation. Too much of money will chase too few of commodities. Okay, so equilibrium price level is increasing from 2 to 4, but value of money goes down from half to 1/4 as you supply more money. So this is what is the explanation. People get rid of their extra money by spending it on goods and services or loaning it to others. So therefore demand for goods and services increases, but supply of goods and services doesn't increase instantaneously. So too much of money will chase too few commodities, price level will go up, we will get inflation, and value of money will go down, because that is 1 by P. Then we also discussed about real versus nominal variables. So real nominal variables are measured in current prices. For example, India's GDP might be $200 billion at the price of 2023, or nominal wage rate, whatever, but real variables are actually price adjusted. So when we have real GDP, means GDP divided by the general price level, and then if you have real wage rate, which indicates wage rate, nominal wage rate divided by the price level, that also we have discussed. And then we said that one important proposition that we derived, that money supply can change only the nominal variables, but it cannot change the real variables, because as a result of which we say this phenomenon as neutrality of money. Okay, which is very simple to understand. Let us say that there are two commodities, CD and pizza. CD's price is $15 and pizza price is $10, and if you increase the price by 10% for each of these commodities, then what will happen? So you will see that both of them will increase, and as a result of which pizza price per unit of CD will not change, even though pizza's price in absolute nominal sense will increase. Price of CD will also increase in nominal sense, but in real sense it doesn't change, right? That is what we have explained in the previous diagram, previous explanation. Okay, that is called classical dichotomy, actually theoretical separation between nominal and real wage rate, neutrality of money. Okay, this is what we have explained. Look at this. So initially it was 1.5 pizza per CD, that was the real price of CD, and then once it increases, when the nominal price supply, after the nominal prices double because of additional money supply, you will have prices of CD is $30 per CD and prices of pizza is $20 per pizza, and then it is again 1.5 pizza per CD. So as the previous example, even the real wage rate also remains unchanged. Okay, so that means money supply doesn't change the variables in real sense, real wage rate doesn't changes, as a result of which demand for labor doesn't change, supply of labor doesn't change, employment doesn't change, and this is true for all other inputs as well. So money supply cannot change the employment of capital, labor, and all other inputs which are required. So output doesn't change, but you have supplied additional money, output is not changing. Obviously too much of money will chase too few commodities, and the result would be inflation. Okay, this is called neutrality of money, and we saw that classical dichotomy and neutrality of money describes the economy in the short run but not in the long run. Then we discussed about velocity of money. Okay, that means as money cannot sit idle in someone else's pocket, money will keep moving from one pocket to another, and the rate at which an average dollar changes hand, it's called velocity of money, which is M into MV equals to PY, that is the formula we learned. PY is the total value of output GDP multiplied by price, and if the money supply is M, then we said that V equals to actually Py divided by M. Okay, so that means to have the total amount of output Py, we must change the money must change its destinations one pocket to another so frequent. How frequently? Now P into Y divided by M. That is the idea. Okay, then we discussed about this velocity of money with some example. And this is another example we learned. Okay, an economy has produced some level of capital, land and labor, and produce some amount of output, and money supply is given. Then it was asked what was the nominal GDP, what was the velocity of money, so on and so forth. These are all we learned in our previous class itself. Now today we will see this particular diagram is again from the United States. We see that nominal GDP, M2 money supply and velocity. So velocity remains almost same, you see, but nominal GDP and money supply is increasing. Okay. So the quantity equation MV equals to Py, we assume that V is stable. A change in M causes nominal GDP to change by the same percentage, but a change in M does not affect Y. Money is neutral. Y is determined by technology and resources. Very easy to understand. Okay. So unless there is change in technology or resources, then money supply cannot change. Why? Because we proved that money supply cannot change the variable in real sense. Real wage rate is not changing. Real rental rate might not be changing. Or real price of energy or material is not changing. So employment of all these inputs are not changing, output is not changing. So P changes by same amount, same percentage as P into Y and M. So P changes by same percentage. Okay. So rapid money supply growth causes rapid inflation. That is very simple to understand. All right. So suppose there is another example we active learning. Let's say their economy has enough labor capital and land to produce 800 bushels of corn, and then V is constant. In 2014 money supply was $2,000 and P was $5 per bushel. Now for 2015 the Federal Reserve Bank of the United States increased the money supply from by 5% to $2,100. So what would be the value of nominal GDP and price, and we need to compute the inflation rate for 2014 and 15. Suppose technological progress causes Y to increase to 824, which was 800 earlier, then what will happen to inflation in this context? So how will you solve? See, in 2014 MV equals to Py, and then in 2015 we have nominal GDP equals to P into Y equals to M into V. That means $2,100 into 2, okay, into 2, which is basically the $4,200. In 2015 what do we have? MV divided by P equals to 5.25. So inflation rate is basically 5.25 minus 5 divided by 5, so 5%, same as money supply. Okay, so money supply, since MB equals to PY, you can easily check that M is directly proportional to money supply from that equation itself. Okay, so price level is directly proportional to the money supply. Here we prove that when money supply increases by 5%, then nominal GDP, sorry, then the price inflation rate is also increasing by 5%. Okay. Now suppose technological progress causes uh, Y to increase. So that means in 2015 what we have, P equals to MB divided by Y, okay, and 4200 divided by 824, now price is 5.10. So now what would be the inflation? 5.10 minus 5 divided by 5 equals to 2%. So that means when there was no output growth, then inflation was 5%, directly proportional to the money supply. But the moment I have Y also to increase, obviously the more Y is rising, P will fall, right? So inflation is there, but the magnitude of the inflation is going down from 5% to now 2%. So if real GDP is constant, then inflation rate is actually equals to money growth rate. So price level is directly proportional. If real GDP is growing, then inflation rate is actually lower than money growth. Okay, because there would be some adjustment when there is money supply, extra demand will be there. Earlier, what was happening? We assume that there was no growth of output, so inflation was exactly the same amount of money supply. But the moment you increase the price output to grow, that additional output will absorb some portion of the extra demand that is coming from the consumers because of this additional money supply. So obviously inflation rate won't be that much because price will not go up that much. Supply of goods and services is also increasing. So the bottom line is economic growth increases number of transactions. Okay, some money growth is needed for these extra transactions. Excess money growth causes inflation, that we have learned. When there is economic growth, number of transaction will definitely increase because people will have money. Okay, some money is needed, but excessive money growth will lead to inflation, that we have to keep in mind. Now there are situations like hyperinflation, inflation exceeding 50% per month. Prices rise when the government prints too much of money. So this is called hyperinflation. Excessive growth in the money supply always causes hyperinflation, which is defined as an inflation rate exceeding 50% per month. So this is an example taken from Zimbabwe, hyperinflation in Zimbabwe. What happened is large government budget deficits led to the creation of large quantities of money and high inflation rate. When the government runs budget deficit, what the government has to do, then government has to print money, because government doesn't have enough revenue to make up for all the expenditures. So what will happen then? Government has to print money. So even the public restroom also, these type of signs were posted. Toilet paper only to be used in this toilet. No cardboard, no cloth, no Zim dollars, no newspapers. See, look at this. No Zim dollars. So that means no Zimbabwean dollars. So government printed so much of money, but there was no goods and services. Okay, as a result of which people started using these dollars also as a toilet paper in the restroom. Look at the money growth from 2007 to 2009. What happened? So it started with 245 US dollar. Then in April 2008 it was 29,400, and then May 28 again it was 207, 209, 680. Look at the number is growing exponentially, and then it came down to 355 in 2009. So this is called hyperinflation, 50% growth in money supply every month. So inflation acts like a tax. Revenue the government raises by creating money. Okay. So like a tax on everyone who holds money. When government prints too much of money, the prices level rises and the dollars in your wallet are less valuable. So it acts like a tax. In the US, the inflation tax today accounts for less than 3% of the total revenue. Okay. So principles of monetary neutrality, an increase in the rate of money growth raises the rate of inflation but does not change the real variable. Okay. That is what we learn, because real interest rate, this is again an important relationship we are learning, Fisher effect. Fisher effect. So an increase in money supply, a rate of money growth raises the rate of inflation but does not change the real variable. Okay. So real interest rate is nominal interest rate minus inflation. So nominal interest rate equals to real interest rate plus inflation. That is what we got. So 1-for-1 adjustment of nominal interest rate to inflation rate. When the Fed increases the rate of money growth, what happens is higher inflation rate, and high inflation will lead to higher nominal interest rate. But in real sense, it is not changing. Okay, because real interest rate is nominal minus the inflation. Okay, look at this. So nominal interest rate and the interest rate, they are moving together. Whenever there is a growth in inflation, nominal interest rate is also increasing, right? So what is the cost of inflation? So inflation basically robs people of the purchasing power of his hard-earned dollar. Okay, inflation fallacy. So when there is inflation, value of money goes down. So even if you are earning too much of money in nominal sense, because of your wages and salaries, you are not able to buy much because the value of money goes down. So as a result of which, what you do, or what we say, that inflation fallacy is basically inflation robs people of the purchasing power of it hard-earned money. So when prices rise, buyers pay more, sellers get more. Okay. So inflation does not in itself produce people's real purchasing power. Okay. So purchasing power is not increasing. I am earning money in nominal sense, but when I adjust that with the general price level, what I see that real wage rate or real salary is not increasing. So that is why we say that inflation does not in itself reduce people's purchasing power, rather it is actually the real variable is changing. That is the reason. Okay. You see, as CPI is going up, the nominal wage rate is also going up. Inflation causes CPI and nominal wage to rise together over the long run. Because when there is inflation, people will demand more money, and wage rate, nominal wage will increase, but not the real wage one. So there is something called shoe leather cost when we talk about cost of inflation. So resources wasted when inflation encourage people to reduce their money holding. Okay. All right. So resource get wasted. Why? Because inflation, when there is inflation, price level is going up, and then people actually need more money uh, for the transaction to make, and as a result of which the money holding goes down substantially, which is known as shoe leather cost. Okay. And muni cost is when there is inflation, what you need to do is actually, it is called menu cost, taken from the example of a restaurant. Suppose when you go to the restaurant, you see the menus, so each item there is a price, and then when there is inflation, that means every time, if one idli was available, one plate of idli was available at 20 rupees, now it is 25 rupees. So likewise for each item prices will change. So what I need to do, I need to print a new menu which will cost me some money. Again when I go to next month, the prices are again changing. So every month I need to change the menu. Okay, so that is called cost of changing the price. Everyone has to change the price and it has some cost. That is called menu cost. Okay, so inflation increases the menu cost that firms must bear. For each and every item, the prices has to be changed. So misallocation of resources from relative price variability. So what happens is firms do not always all raise prices at the same time. So relative prices can vary and distorts the allocation of prices, right? So when there is inflation, so not all the firms in the economy are changing their prices. So relative prices can vary from one firm to another, and that way it will distort the allocation of resources. Okay. So actually the let's say allocation of labor capital and material should have been allocated in favor of ith firm, but just because the ith firm has not changed the prices, jth firm, just because the jth firm has changed the prices, so what happens is the price of the resources will appear apparently little higher for the jth firm compared to the ith firm. So even though it has to be allocated for ith firm, it will go to the jth firm, as a result of which there would be some misallocation. There will be some confusion and inconvenience. Inflation changes the yardstick, what you use to measure transaction. So it complicates long range planning and comparison of dollar versus dollars amounts over a period of time. Okay. So yardstick means, as we discussed earlier, one utility of money is used as an yardstick to quote the prices of goods and services. So when there is inflation, we need to change that, and that causes some confusion and inconvenience. Okay. Tax distortion. Inflation makes nominal income to grow faster than real income, and then tax rate is based only on nominal income, not the real one. So taxes are based on nominal income and some are not adjusted for inflation. Okay. So inflation causes people to pay more taxes even when their real income does not change, rather it may go down. Okay. So my tax rate is 30%, let's say I'm in the 30% income tax bracket. So when there is inflation, my tax rate is still based on the nominal income, but in real sense my income is not changing. Okay, so people may tend to pay more when there is inflation, more tax when there is inflation, even though their real income is not increasing. That is what it says. So some active learning. Suppose you deposit some $1,000 in the bank for 1 year. Let's say case 1, zero inflation, so nominal interest rate is 10%, and case 2, inflation rate is 10%, nominal interest rate is 20%. In which case does the real value of your money go the most? Now assume the tax rate is 25%. Okay, tax rate is 25%, in which case do you pay more taxes? Compute the after tax nominal interest rate and then subtract inflation to get the after tax real interest rate. So you deposit $1,000, in which case, so first case is zero inflation, 10% nominal interest rate. Second case is 10% inflation, but nominal interest rate is 20%. So in both cases, real interest rate is actually 10%, because if you subtract inflation, you see the nominal interest rate is 10% only. Okay, so money is growing at the same rate. Now suppose the tax rate is 25%, nominal interest rate is 10%, nominal interest rate is 20% in the second case. So interestingly, you see, as I said, the tax is based on nominal variable, not the real one. So in the first case, you pay tax, your interest income is 100, okay, 10% of $1,000, and then when it is 100, you pay 25 rupees as tax. But in the second case, income is 200 and you pay 50 as tax, okay, income tax, right? But your real interest rate is same actually. Okay, so that is why compute the after tax nominal interest rate. Nominal interest rate is 0.75 into 10 equals to 7.5. So real interest rate is 7.5 minus 0, that was 0 interest rate, right? And then in case 2, nominal interest rate is 0.75 into 20% now, that is 15%. So real interest rate is 15% minus 10% equals to 5%. Okay. So what we have learned then? Inflation raises nominal interest rate, but not the real interest rate. Increases savers tax burden. Okay, when there is inflation, since the interest rate is taxable and tax is imposed on nominal interest rate, so it will increase the savers tax burden and it will lower the after tax real interest rate, right? So inflation causes this type of cost to the people. And this is called arbitrary redistribution of wealth. Now unexpected inflation means what happens? This inflation redistributes wealth among the population, not by merit, not by need. So redistribute wealth among debtors and creditors. And inflation is volatile and uncertain. When the average rate of inflation is very high, it creates a volatility and uncertainty in the economy. Okay. So all these costs are quite high for economies experiencing high hyperinflation. For economies with inflation less than 10% per year, with low inflation, These costs probably are much smaller, though their exact size is open to debate, right? So, we say that economies experiencing less than 10% is with low inflation rate. So, these costs what we have discussed earlier, they would be smaller. So, in conclusion then what you can say that prices rise when the government prints too much of money. We saw that money is neutral in the short run, in the long run, affecting only the nominal variables. Money has important effects in the short run on real variables like output and employment, but not in the long run. That is called neutrality of money. And to explain inflation in the long run, economists they use quantity theory of money. The price level depends on the quantity of money and the inflation rate depends on the money growth. The classical dichotomy is the division of real variables and nominal variables. The neutrality of money is the idea that money supply or changes in money supply can change only the nominal variables but not the real ones. And most economists believe these ideas describe the economy in the long run, right? That means in the short run, money supply can affect the real variables also. So, inflation tax is basically the loss of real value of people's money holding when the government causes inflation by printing money. That is called inflation tax. Okay. When you hold money, then government causes basically you need to hold more money because prices are going up, and when it is you are holding money, there is an opportunity cost because you are losing the interest, and those who are saving from their saving also tax is imposed on interest income. Okay, so that is why inflation is the loss in real value of people's money holding. When government causes inflation, so that is called inflation. That means I am holding money over a period of time, the value is going down, down and down. That is the cost for me. Okay, all right. So there is a cost, it acts like a tax. If I hold money instead in my pocket instead of putting in my savings, why I am holding? Because now I need more money, more liquid money for my transaction, and every time because of this inflation my money is losing its value. So that means in my wallet, if I had 1000 rupees every day, that 1000 rupees value is going down. It acts like a tax. Okay, the Fisher effect is basically it shows the how the real and nominal interest rate are related, which says that real interest rate is the nominal interest rate minus the inflation. And the cost of inflation includes many costs, shoe-leather cost and confusion and inconvenience, distribution of relative prices and allocation of resources, tax distortions and arbitrary redistribution of wealth. These are all cost of inflation, even though we are not able to discuss all these in detail because that requires a detailed in-depth understanding of macroeconomics, which is beyond the scope of these course principles of economics, but we can understand at least the preliminary ideas of all these costs of inflation. So with this, I am closing my discussion today. Thank you.